621. Welcome to Kirby Nation, the podcast of the Kirby Wilbur Show. Today it's Talking Tech with Tony North of our IT department. We spend time every week talking about tech issues and trying to put them in layman's terms so all of you can understand it. And Tony's an expert at that. How you doing?
That's right. Well, thank you.
You are, aren't you?
I am. Thank you, Kirby. Don't tell everybody, but that may be true.
Well, no, you're really good because you're explaining these terms in ways that everybody can understand them.
That's right.
And what we want to talk about first is something that happened to your lovely better half today.
Listen,
it's happening to a lot of people.
It is happening to a lot of people. Matter of fact, we had an agenda today, but I'm going to change from that just because this occurred today. So my wife, she received a phone call this morning from Comcast, and it was the Comcast number. So, as a customer, she picked up the phone, and they said, hey, by the way, we've noticed that there's hackers on your account, and there's a few in this area, and we want to, first of all, get on your system and make sure that they didn't take much, understand, the issue, and then come up with some protection rules that can help you and configure your system. And of course, as a non-technical person, she immediately said, oh my gosh, that's terrible, and I've been hearing about this on the TV, and so what do I need to do? And so then they hopped on the computer. They were asking some questions. She noticed when they were hopped on the computer, they were looking at other things besides what was on her laptop, like my Wi-Fi administrative password. And they were asking some questions that, quite honestly, weren't related to technical at all, like about the account. And in my wife's mind, she's like, hold on a second. They're Comcast. They know all this stuff. We've been with them for 13 years. It's not like they don't have this information. And that's when she started to question what was going on. Of course, once she questioned it, the folks on the phone started to get a little antsy and say, no, we need to do this right away. As opposed to, hey, let's talk about this a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that, again, triggered an emotion in her that maybe this is wrong. So she hung up the phone and she called the Comcast number, which was the same number that called in on us. Mm-hmm. And she asked the folks, hey, do you know such and such? The name of the person that was supposed to be helping us. And they said, no, we don't have anybody here by that name. And she goes, are you kidding? I've just given them access to my home computer, and they're working on my router right now. And I can't believe that they called in on your guys' 800 number. And so they said, so ma'am, we've heard about these type of things occurring, and this is what you need to do. Which was, by the way, when she told me the same thing I told her. Disconnect the laptop. Get it disconnected off the Wi-Fi. If you can't do that quickly, then unplug the laptop and disconnect the battery. And so that's what I'd love to make sure your audience understands. When they get to a situation that's a cybersecurity issue like this, if it's a desktop, then you unplug the back of the desktop. Then we'll figure out what to do once we get it back going again. If it's a laptop, you unplug the laptop and then you disconnect the battery, because, listen, if you just unplug the laptop, the battery can keep the power going. Mm-hmm. And so this is what happened. My wife thought she turned off the laptop when she was talking to the real Comcast. And then when they asked her questions, she went back to her laptop and she realized the people were still working on it. Now, my wife kind of felt embarrassed because, she's like, we've talked about cybersecurity issues all the time. I had a customer last year, Kirby, where he was actually locked out of his system. They did the same thing that they did with my wife, although they called from Microsoft is where they called from at that time. Okay. And they connected to the computer, and they basically used that computer as a host. And this is what a lot of people don't understand from the technical standpoint, which is it's not just that they want it on my wife's laptop. And the information that's on my wife's laptop is important. Yeah, they will collect that information, but what they also want to do is use our laptop as a host machine to attack other machines. And this is what happened to one of my customers last year. They used his machine and they set it up so that it could be a vehicle to connect to other machines and get information from them. Secondly, if they use this laptop, like let's say of my wife's, and she doesn't know it, and they're using it to get connected to other machines. They're specifically looking for machines that are connected to large businesses. And that's really where they make their money.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get the permissions from our laptop, go to a company and get connected to a company, and then have the permissions on that system, now you have access to, like we talked about last week, Capital One.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where people need to know it's not just being used to collect their information, it's being used as a vehicle to collect a lot of details and connect to a lot of different systems. So finally, my wife disconnected the laptop. I had her go down and unplug the modem router, which is from Comcast, and I didn't have her turn it off. I had her unplug it immediately, and because now they know those what we call the MAC address, which is the address to get into our house through a computer. And once she disconnected it, I told her, now go to Comcast. Take that machine, that router, go to Comcast and swap it for a brand new one. And when she got there, the great thing that I felt was they told her that's exactly what she should have done.
Well, they're right.
They're right.
They were right. Because you were right to begin with.
That's
and
right.
They were right. Okay.
So this is what we want, people to be aware of. And my customer a year ago, they didn't just get connected to his machine and then connect to other machines. They actually held him hostage from getting into a machine. He's a lawyer. I mean, everything inside that computer is what he needs. So they locked him out, and they said to get back in, which is what they were just starting to talk to my wife about, is to get back in, you're going to have to pay some money because the software we're using costs money.
So what they're doing is they're blackmailing you.
Yes.
They call under a legitimate pretense. You think they are legit. You let them in. They then block you and say, if you want it all back, you'll have to pay us.
Exactly.
Because didn't that happen to a city somewhere
It did. It did.
Some city got blackmailed.
Held hostage.
Yeah,
that's exactly
hostage.
Right. And matter of fact, the state of Louisiana right now is calling it a state emergency because there have been so many people hacking into their businesses in Louisiana that they're really redoing all of their whole network.
So if somebody gets a phone call from Comcast or the Internal Revenue Service or the FBI that sounds very official, and you look on your screen and it looks like the number, like what happened to Becky, what do they do? Should they then say, I need verification, or should they assume that they say, need to somehow make sure this person was who he says he is? Or
yeah.
she is?
Yeah. The best thing to do is to hang up. Their whole premise is keeping you on the phone and then holding you hostage. My customer ended up paying $400 and then got access. Then they locked him out again. They were asking for another $400.
Because once they're in, they're in.
They're in. That's right. And so what you want to do is, if you hear Comcast is calling you and it's their number, but you have any suspicion whatsoever, then the best thing to do is hang up, because their whole premise is keeping you on the phone, dragging it out. But hang up and then call and look at your bill or go on the website and find the Comcast number to make sure it's Comcast.
Right.
In this case, it was the same number. And then call that number from a different phone. We called from the landline. She was on the cell phone. And so we called from the landline and we got connected to Comcast, and then we explained everything that was going on, and they said, yes, you're being hacked right now. The hacker that says they're not a hacker is a hacker. And that's really the trick there, Kirby, is the hacker brings up the topic about hacking, and immediately in our minds we think, oh, this has got to be legitimate, because a hacker wouldn't bring up the word hacking. And so, call them from your bill number and verify what's going on, specifically the name of the person you're working with and exactly what they're doing, and Comcast will give you instructions of what to do.
So if you get a call from a Comcast or whoever, first thing, get their name.
Yep.
Get their name, ask for their name. They should be willing to give you their name.
That's right.
And then write it down. And so when the time comes, if you assume you're getting hacked, you hang up and call Comcast, say, does John Smith work for you?
That's right.
Is there John Smith that would be calling me for this?
That's right. The only other thing that she did notice that we could share today is she did notice that everybody that she spoke to, the hacker that said they weren't a hacker, they did speak a different language. So, I mean, I don't want people to be, thinking that everybody who speaks a different language is a
In other
hacker.
words, did they have foreign
But did
accents?
they?
What you're
Yeah,
saying?
they had foreign accents.
Okay.
And so because of that, that was after, they were asking questions that didn't seem
Mm-hmm.
real.
Mm-hmm.
Then understanding that they were speaking a foreign language,
Right.
that clued in Becky to maybe I'm not talking to the right place.
Okay.
So a couple of things to look for.
All right. Watch out because this is happening across the country to
That's right.
people, and it could happen to you.
That's right.
Okay. Sounds good. By
Absolutely.
the way, you're listening to Kirby Nation, Talking Tech with Tony. We do this once a week or
Once a
so,
week, that's right.
talking about important tech issues where Tony North from our IT department puts them in layman's terms so you understand problems you're having out there. Um, the story you had
Yeah.
kind of goes along with this, where a number of AT&T employees, people actually were working for AT&T,
That's right.
unlocked a lot of mobile phones
That's
to plant malware and then remove the phone from the provider's network for money. What was
Yes.
going on?
A really sad story here. A gentleman out of Pakistan, he's 34 years old, Fayed is his name, had a scheme where he was selling software to AT&T employees. And based on that, the software would open up the system, providing safeguards on the phone. What they were looking to do is have this software, if you were an AT&T customer, change from network to network. Now, just so you know, when you have a cell phone, you stay on that network. So if I have T-Mobile, then I stay on T-Mobile network for everything I do. If I have, Verizon, I stay on Verizon. I'm on Verizon's network. There's not a situation where you could have, in this case, an AT&T phone and be on a Verizon network. That's impossible. And secondly, it's skirting the system for AT&T because AT&T bills based on volume, calls, all those different things. And in this situation, they were selling illegal software to employees so that they could switch to, for instance, if you're an AT&T customer, using the Verizon network. And now that Verizon, you're piggybacking on their network, you're getting basically free phone calls. It's the same thing as, back in the day in the 90s, we used to have fake numbers that you could use on pay phones and you get a free call. It's the same concept, except it's using a software. Well, they got caught. The good news, right? They got caught in 2013. And all those employees were fired in 2013. We're like, whew, the problem's over. No. These initiatives that just like hackers I talked about with Becky, they have different ways of doing things. So instead of now using software, they developed a new malware. And that malware, in essence, did the same thing, but it had to be planted by AT&T employees on the AT&T network. So guess what? He paid them $500 a piece to install this malware, which still did the same thing. And by the way, Kirby, we're just not talking about AT&T in Texas or in a big building in downtown Seattle. This is in my backyard, in the Bothell call center office. They picked a location where there's not a huge city and a lot of people may not understand what's going on, and they paid these employees to install this malware thinking that it was something that would help them. However, it authorized the unlocking of these accounts and then enabled those people to switch their networks.
So were the employees victims of fraud as well?
They
Did
were.
they not know what they were doing?
They did not know what they were doing. They were being told that they were doing something that was going to be helpful, and they executed on this both times. The first time before 2013 with the software that was on a USB stick, and then later with a malware that they were able to just download from someplace and set up on the AT&T network. So yeah, two victims in this. The victims of the customer, which in this case would be AT&T's network, and then secondly, the employees following this instruction through by the way, you know what they would do, Kirby? They literally would stand outside the building at the AT&T call center in Bothell, Washington, and just kind of pull people aside and say, "Hey, we've got this new program. We want to see if you want to be part of it." And if they did that in a larger environment where there was a little bit more security, it would just not be possible.
Right.
So they picked a place that they knew they could prey on employees.
Wow. got to be careful about that stuff, don't you?
You do, definitely
Yeah, because
so.
what happens if you find employees who are willing to do it openly and freely? I mean, I've got to believe that some people have a price, if you will.
They do. That's right.
And so you got to be concerned because your carrier protects the security of the system, and these people were inadvertently sucked in, thinking
That's
they're
right.
doing something positive. But there's always potential for the guy who decides, AT&T, they've mistreated me, and somebody come along and offering $10,000 or $20,000 to do this. He thinks, I hate the company.
That's right.
It could really mess things up. So security people have to be worried not just about hackers breaking the system, but employees who may turn out to be bad guys.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Absolutely.
Okay. Good. Makes me feel so much better.
That's right.
Thank you. I am feeling so much more secure about my cell phone company.
That's right.
All right.
Always these things that it's in the fine print. It's
Yeah, it
the things that we may not always be